Greetings, friends. It's Yelizaveta once again, and this is another episode of the Tango Banter. We are on number 22 of the Tango Banter, and last week's episode with Horacio Godoy has stirred up so much great conversation, and it's been so nice to hear from all of you who were inspired and intrigued by our conversation last week. If you haven't had a chance to hear the episode, you should check it out. It was my very first interview with a guest on my podcast. And those of you who are eager to experience more of Horacio Godoy and soak up some of his enthusiasm and charisma for tango, you can sign up for his seminar that's happening this Saturday on July 9th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. And it's called Essential Layers of Tango Music. So if you are a beginner dancer and are curious what you need to know about tango music, how to think about tango music, how to interpret it, or maybe you're a more seasoned dancer and you somehow have not gotten some of this essential knowledge that we so really need to know as dancers. So things about the music and how to think about it, how to interpret it with your body. You really, really should join this seminar. It's really so helpful. And Horacio is just such a fantastic teacher. And as you know now, he is practically a living, breathing, walking music library knowledge database when it comes to tango music. So it's a real treat to have access to him from wherever you are in the world. I mean, I keep talking about that because when I was first getting into tango and I went to Buenos Aires and I would hear the name Horacio Godoy and his classes and how brilliant he was. And honestly, I couldn't get in. It was always so crowded. And there was just this feeling of like, oh, it's so much work to have access to him because so many people are flocking to his classes there. And so to have him practically all to yourself in the comfort of your home for an hour and a half and soak up his knowledge, I just feel it's a real gift of our time. So I hope you take advantage of it. All of the info is on my website at imsotango.com. You can also find this link in the show notes below. Now, since we're on the topic of Horacio Godoy and Buenos Aires, I thought I would dive in today and reminisce about my first time going to Buenos Aires and my first time visiting Horacio's Milonga, La Viruta. Now, La Viruta, I think, is probably the longest running milonga at this point in Buenos Aires. And I am so just moved by that place and how much that one milonga brought to my experience. It's somewhat of a mecca, at least in my consciousness. And I think that many of you who have been to Buenos Aires will probably share this sentiment. There's something really special about it. First of all, it's located inside of an Armenian embassy, which in itself is kind of strange because, at 2:00 in the morning, you show up in this kind of very serious building with lots of like diplomatic and political energy around it. You come in and you hear the music wafting from below you. So you walk down some stairs and the music gets more and more, more and more intense until you descend into this darkness, this dark space of nothing but tango energy. Everything in that place is tango, and the walls are permeated with that music. It just seems La Viruta is the spirit and the place at the same time. And I ended up thinking this to myself, and I would always say that all roads lead to La Viruta, in this way that no matter where you were dancing on any particular night, at the very end, after you finish going to a practica, and a milonga, and a house party, whatever, the question was always, La Viruta? It was kind of like an understanding that, yes, we're partying right now, we're at this milonga, but we will finish. Or are you going to finish? Are you going to go to La Viruta? And that's where all the nights ended, especially Sunday night. Sunday night seemed to be particularly special back in the day when I was there, pre-COVID. I'm not sure what it's like now. I'm curious to find out. So I remember feeling very similar to how I felt when I first went to India. And I was in India for a couple of weeks doing a temple tour in South India. So the first day that we arrived at our first destination, where we visited a Shiva temple, there was a particular ceremony we attended. And walking into that space and witnessing people engaged in strange etiquette and ceremony and ritual, things that seemed so exotic and so far away, but also kind of ancient, kind of archetypal. Somehow I felt, both as a total foreigner and definitely an outsider, and yet this sense of familiarity, sense of recognition of something that's universal. And this is what La Viruta felt like to me when I first walked in there. And I was just, for the first time, experiencing this whole lifestyle of dancing all night long. It was my first time in Buenos Aires. I went with my teachers at the time. And I remember I had just bought some new shoes because, of course, that's what you do. I mean, I think it was the case that we got off the plane and we went to the shoe store straight away without even going to the hotel yet. And of course, at that time, it had to be Comme il faut. Comme il faut was the brand. It was the hottest brand you could possibly have. And I remember the salespeople being very stuck up and kind of snarky, not very friendly. But it didn't matter because people bought those shoes by the dozen. So I had my very first pair of silver Comme il faut shoes, which were slightly on the small side. This was, and maybe still is, a common advice that I hear, to get a shoe that's a little bit smaller and then let it wear out and kind of loosen on your foot. I am not a big fan of this advice, and at that time I did not listen to my intuition on this. So I had these shoes that were just a tad bit too small, but oh my God, they were hot, of course. And I remember the energy of this space. And we came in there around, I would think around 11 or midnight. And the floor was completely packed and there were people everywhere. And it just felt so chaotic and so overwhelming. And of course, I'm feeling all of this insecurity and fear. Am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be able to dance? Will anybody ask me to dance? Just so many questions, so many fears. At that time, I was actually even prone to panic attacks in social spaces. So it's really incredible that I survived that first night, that I didn't just leave immediately, because it's kind of overwhelming. And I've talked to other people who've said that tango actually helps them deal with social anxiety, depression, panic attacks, OCD, and things like that. And I've often wondered why that is, that what you might think is a limitation, something that would prevent you from being in a place like La Viruta, feeling panicked, feeling anxiety, that somehow that is the medicine, that is the therapeutic thing that needs to happen. And I think it's because tango has this interesting quality of feeling isolated in a crowded space. There's a lot of privacy within the world of a milonga. So you can be totally introverted and you can sit somewhere in the corner and be invisible at the same time that you can be part of a group and be social to a certain degree. So I was kind of battling at that point all of these things inside myself. I was very insecure. I had a lot of insecurity about my body. I felt very inferior. I felt that there's something wrong with me. I mean, I grew up feeling this way, and I think because I'm an immigrant, those are emotions I feel seem to be pretty common among people who've had to move around a lot and just feel like an outsider, literally and then emotionally as well. So here I am, and I really feel in my mind, my memory, I mean, it's been a long time, but I felt very alone and kind of like fending for myself. I did not really know the rules. And the etiquette was kind of like, I kind of understood it, kind of didn't. I had heard a lot of it, different advice, like be careful who you dance with, because who you dance with, other people see that, and that will influence them, whether they ask you to dance or not. And again, I'm not a big fan of this advice, because again, how do you know? How do you know? You walk into a space, especially if you're at the beginning of your journey, there's no way you're going to know whether the dancer you dance with is considered to be a good or a bad dancer. So all it does is just make you feel even more anxious. So that was like in the back of my mind. And then, you're supposed to observe the rules, because if you don't observe the rules, you won't get dances and it's not going to be a good experience. And it's just so much anxiety. And I try to really lighten it up for beginners these days. And I hope that's more of a cultural shift at this point when people get into tango, because it really doesn't need to be so scary, even in Buenos Aires, honestly. So anyway, the night before this night, I was at a different milonga, and I thought I scored pretty big. I got to dance with somebody that, in my eyes, was considered a really good dancer, a very authentic, legitimate tanguero. I formed this opinion because my teacher wanted to dance with him and spoke highly of him. And it seemed like he was in general like well liked, and he wore a suit, and he was just a nice guy. So I had this beautiful dance with him. And I see him at La Veruta the next day. And so of course I'm like, oh, is he going to want to dance with me? And there's so much wrapped up in that question, right? Because at that point, if he doesn't want to dance with me, that means that I am not good enough because we danced yesterday. And if he doesn't want to dance with me today, that means he didn't like it, right? Again, I know this pattern, this thought train, this particular route the mind can take. And I know people still think that way. Lots of dancers think this way, that I danced with this person yesterday. They seem to enjoy it. So why are they not dancing with me now? And anyway, I'm not going to digress too much on that path, although I have so many things to say about that thought pattern because it's one of the more painful and hurtful thoughts you can have, because there's no way out of it. Like, either that person dances with you and you gain a lot of self-validation from it, but then your self-validation is kind of tied to that person. So if at any point that person doesn't dance with you, there's that danger of falling back into that, like, oh my God, I'm not good enough, right? Or you just feel bad about your dancing right away, and then you're kind of chasing your tail. What's wrong with me? Was it because it's my axis? I just know it. It's because I didn't have my axis. It's because my footwork is not right. It's my right arm. It's the arm. That's really what it is. I need to take more privates. I need to take more classes. I need to do more technique. I need to work on my core, and then it just snowballs, right? So not a good way to think, but that's where I was. Okay, that's where I was, and I'm thinking, I really want to dance with this guy, and I want to feel good about myself. And so then I do it. I get the tanda, and I am so excited. So we take the embrace, and I just feel, for just a moment, I just feel like, wow, good for me. He obviously liked dancing with me. I must be good enough, And so we start dancing. Now, at this point, I know no Spanish. I mean, that's not true. I took Spanish in high school, so there was some Spanish in my brain. But really, what was available to me was about 5% of what I had learned. So I could only manage a C and a no, and por favor, maybe. So we have this, of course, this kind of like traditionally awkward thing between the songs. ¿Cómo estás? ¿De dónde sos? Like all those questions, like when you go to Buenos Aires every single time, it's the same questions, right? You keep repeating yourself over and over. So I, with my very broken Spanish, can say a few words about myself, but so much of it is just like, let's just get back to the dancing, okay? Where it's just really not about talking. So we dance one song, and then we dance another song, and then we dance another song. And by this point, my feet are beginning to be more prominent in my awareness, let's just say. I'm starting to feel that, so familiar feeling to me now. That feeling of that achiness and pain shooting through the bones of my feet and into my ankles. And it's becoming really intense, right? I mean, this is my first time really dancing in these heels and dancing in heels in general for this long of a time. Like, that was pretty new to me. So I continue to dance, and I'm starting to really feel the pain, and we dance another song, and then we dance another song and another song, and a realization dawns on me that there are no cortinas. Yes, no cortinas. Now, to my knowledge, and I invite you, listeners, to update me if this has changed, but La Viruta on a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, the weekend. I didn't go to La Viruta as much during the week. So I'm really, in my memory, it's the weekend time. No cortinas, because, and when I asked about this, they said, it's considered a practica. Whatever. Okay. So that's something I learned, that traditionally practicas don't play cortinas, because then you can just dance as much as you want with the same partner, and it's a little bit more relaxed. So La Viruta, I had never experienced anything like that. In the middle of the night, we're dancing, no cortinas. What does one do? I mean, I am a woman in despair at this point. When you add up my inability to speak Spanish and ask questions, as well as not knowing anything about this culture, it's all new to me, not knowing the etiquette, hyper vigilant, trying to obey the rules, afraid of messing it up for myself and offending people, and on top of it, like, super uncomfortable socially and prone to panic attacks. Like, I proceed to dance with him, I think, for probably 3 tandas worth. Every time that another song ends, he just looks at me and says, "Otra?" And I say, "Sí." And I literally could not pronounce the word no or gracias and walk off. Like, I could not get myself to walk off the floor. I was so freaked out that I did not know what to do. I did not know what the rules were. And if I didn't know what the rules were, I just was like deer in headlights, waiting for someone to tell me what to do. Eventually, this man's excitement about dancing with me, I think, started to wane, because he could tell that I have nothing to say for myself. So he eventually had pity on me and asked me if I wanted some water. And finally, I was like, "Sí, sí." And so we walked to the bar, and I think he got me a bottle of water, and he just walked away. He was a real gentleman, and I appreciated his patience with me. Um, and I also appreciate he didn't keep it going for longer than that, because it was the most amount of pain I had been in up until that point. It was incredible. So the rest of the night is kind of a blur, and in my memory, that night and all nights in La Veruta that I've ever spent, which collectively, I've never thought about that, but you know, I'd say there's about 100 nights at least of being in La Veruta over the years. Maybe it's not that many. I don't know. But it feels like La Veruta had become like a portal where I would go through these um, sort of rite of passage moments in my dance. And every time I would go back there, it would be sort of another layer of processing my own stuff and witnessing and confronting my fears and, you know, working through the various layers of what it means to be a social tango dancer. And the one other thing, though, that I remember, which is still sort of a sweet image in my mind. I loved feeling this when it happened the first time, and I'm sure it still happens. But we had arrived there around 11 or 12, and so we were there for a while, and I think it was kind of on my mind, like, oh, it's getting late, and when are we going to go home? My feet are killing me. And all of a sudden, there was just this shift in the field of the space. And there was this big switch over. Half the floor was leaving, and it was like all of the tourists and, you know, people who are obviously kind of like me, like new people, or maybe slightly more beginner level, more casual dancers. And there was this influx of all of these badass tango dancers, or at least in my eyes, that's what it seemed like. It was all these people who were dressed to the nines, men impeccably groomed, with these sharp suits, and women showing up with full makeup on, like as if they just got up and put their clothes on to come, which is probably what happened for some of them. Like, some people didn't bother to go to other milongas. They would just go to the La Veruta at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the way I perceived them, how cool they seemed to me. And I was like, how do you get to be that? How do you get to walk in and look and feel like that? And it's interesting because that is something that I ended up exploring in my own way, that trajectory, that desire to be the cool dancer, to walk in and have other people be excited that you're there. And I thought for a long time that that's just my own desire. Like, that's just a thing that I want because I am insecure and I just want to be cool. I'm an immigrant. And, like, I used to explain it away. But recently I realized that I'm not the only one. That actually, when I really get people to share what they want out of tango, a lot of times they'll confide that they just want to feel like they're that hot dancer. They want to feel that they're popular, that everybody wants to dance with them. And what I was to learn over the next, I don't know, years. How many years did it take me? It took me a few years, not as long as it could have. I'm glad it didn't take longer for me to figure that out. But again, that feeling of being cool, it doesn't really come from anything external, ultimately. It does take time, but it's just a matter of doing it, of being that, of practicing it, practicing feeling that way, finding what makes you feel that way. And just like in India, I feel that being in a Milonga space, going to a Milonga, having it be part of your weekly practice, a weekly ritual, it is a spiritual journey. It is a spiritual experience on many levels. And achieving your satisfaction in tango, getting to the point where you feel good about your dance and you feel fulfilled, you feel excited about it, that is a spiritual journey. And it is a very inward journey. It is a very awkward, frustrating, uncomfortable experience sometimes, many times. Most of the time, it can be that. But the only thing that you have to do is just keep doing it. Keep going there and keep experiencing these weird things that happen in tango, like not being able to vocalize even what you want. And I don't want to get into explanation of why I think that story is important. I'm sure you can draw metaphors there and parallels to bigger themes in life. For me, though, it's a reminder of that being a tango dancer and being a social tango dancer is something that takes guts. It takes commitment, self-development. It takes courage. And where I started my tango journey and where I am now is 180 degrees from some perspective, right? Like now, I'm sure some of you who've seen me at the Milonga, and I've heard you say this to me. How is this possible? How could you ever feel insecure? You of all people? What? Right? But I think it's valuable to share my story because that person who struggles to say what she wants, like that's still there on a different level, different place, different degree, but it's still very much there. It has not been eliminated or like somehow I finally figured out how not to feel those feelings. So I hope wherever you are in your tango journey that you feel encouraged to not shy away from the difficulty or not fall prey to judging your tango experience by some standard that it's supposed to be a certain way, that you're supposed to be a certain way. What makes tango a more fun spiritual journey for me, perhaps, than other spiritual journeys is that it is an active interaction with other people, and that everyone is in the same boat. Everybody's dealing with these same questions, same fears and feelings. And as long as we remember that we're all going through this, we choose. And we choose to learn, and then we choose to mess up, and then we choose to correct our mess ups, and then we choose to come up with new things and get rid of old things. Like, it's a very palpable day-to-day type of spiritual journey, on par with, like, what's the saying? Like, wash the dishes, mow the lawn. Like, that's the spiritual journey, you know? So anyway, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, and if you have any meaningful La Viruta memories you want to share with me. Yeah, thanks for being with me during this time. I look forward to connecting with you next week on the next Tango Banter. And please don't forget the seminar with Horacio Godoy this Saturday from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. All the info is at IamSoTango.com. All right, my loves. Ciao.